Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Brewer's Minute. So we've had a couple weeks of Ixalan Standard now, and the format is kind of making itself clear, and one thing that we know for sure is the format is about answering two creatures. We gotta answer two gods. We have to be able to answer the Scarab God and Hazoret the Fervent for our brews to have a chance to succeed. And I'm super serious about this. If you sit down to brew in Standard, you gotta have a plan to answer those two cards. If you don't, you're just gonna lose to them. Something like 2/3 of decks in Standard are playing one or the other of those gods as their finisher, and thanks to the indestructibility on Hazoret, the ability to keep bouncing back to your hand from the Scarab God, they're really hard to deal with. So our topic for today, for our Brewer's Minute, is answering Hazoret and the Scarab God, answering the gods, basically. And we have a bunch of different answers. We have some partial answers, which, they have their uses, but aren't ideal, because they only deal with one or the other of the gods, and they don't necessarily deal with all of them permanently. We have some sketchy answers, which do get the job done, but maybe not quite where we want to be. And then there's a handful of good answers. So a quick reminder before we break down answering the gods. If you enjoy Brewer's Minute and the other series here on the channel, it would be amazing of you if you take a quick second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's start with the partial answers. These are cards that are answers. They do deserve consideration in our deck building process, but they come with a bit of a warning. They don't deal with both the Scarab God and Hazoret permanently. So, for example, in red we have Puncturing Blow and Hour of Devastation. So Puncturing Blow, great answer to the Scarab God. It lines up super well, 4 mana, get rid of it forever thanks to exile. Seems like it deserves consideration if you're playing a deck like Robin on Pred, since you can kind of naturally blank your opponent's Hazorets with your Hazorets. The Scarab God is a bigger concern for you. So I think that deserves consideration. On the other side of the scale for red, we have Hour of Devastation, which doesn't do much against the Scarab God. I mean, I guess it's fine. It does temporarily slow it down, get rid of the tokens it makes, but it is a good answer to Hazoret if you're playing something like Grixis Control. Then in blue we have Commit to Memory, which is worth mentioning because it is one of the only good ways for blue to deal with a Hazoret or the Scarab God that's already on the battlefield. You'll see when we get to the good answers that blue is mostly focused on countering these creatures before they hit the battlefield. Commit, while it's not really a permanent answer because you're just putting it on top of your opponent's deck, the second card down, it's a temporary answer, but it does give you a way to get a breather. You get a turn or two where you can try to kind of reassemble your counter spells, maybe keep the Hazoret or the Scarab God from coming back down from the top of your opponent's library. So it's worth keeping in mind at least. We also have some interesting blue and black answers. Hostage Taker is one of the highest variance answers. In the best case, it is insane. Let's say it's turn 10, your opponent plays Scarab God, you Hostage Taker, take their Scarab God, cast their Scarab God, you win the game. On the other hand, the worst case, it is pretty sad. Your opponent casts their Hazoret on turn 4, you Hostage Taker their Hazoret. Your opponent's like, alright, sure, whatever. They untap, they Lightning Strike your Hostage Taker, get back their Hazoret, kill you, you die. So Hostage Taker isn't always a permanent answer. It's a permanent answer sometimes if you have enough mana and it's a really late game, but it's kind of a more temporary answer most of the time. Then we have Hazoret and Battle at the Bridge, which are good answers to Hazoret in specific for artifact themed decks. You need a lot of artifacts to make them work, but the -X ability does get around the indestructibility of Hazoret. Not necessarily that good against a Scarab God. It's going back to your opponent's hand. Maybe if you can combine it with Crick of Condemnation or something like that, it can get the job done. But it's worth keeping those in mind. So those are our partial answers that kind of temporarily get the job done or get rid of one or the other. So let's move on to our sketchy answers. These are answers that do deal with both the Scarab God and Hazoret, but maybe aren't really where you want to be if you're trying to win games with your deck. So we have Lost Legacy, and the problem with Lost Legacy, while it seems sweet, just 3 mana, get rid of all the Hazorets, all the Scarab Gods, The problem we have with Lost Legacy is, against Ramanop Red in specific, if you're tapping out on turn 3 to Lost Legacy Hazorets, you're probably just dying to Earthshaker Kendras and On-Crop Crashers and Lightning Strikes and all the other stuff your opponent has in their deck. So while maybe Lost Legacy is an answer to the Scarab God that's worth considering, and is already good because one of the non-Scarab God Hazoret decks that is a part of Standard are Approach of the Second Sun decks, and Lost Legacy is insanely good against those decks, and maybe you'll just bring in your Lost Legacy anyway against the Scarab God. I'm not sure you want this to be your primary plan to dealing with the gods, which are so problematic. The other sketchy answer I wanted to mention is Overwhelming Splendor. If you can actually get an Overwhelming Splendor on the battlefield, you got no concerns about Hazoret or the Scarab God. Your problems are over. The challenge is resolving an 8-mana enchantment before you're already dead to the Scarab God and Hazoret. But if you can figure out a way to get it on the battlefield, it is a super sweet, permanent, very hard to deal with answer to both of those creatures. So while it's probably a bit too expensive to really see competitive play, it is a fun and interesting way to deal with the answers, albeit a bit sketchy. So let's move on to the good answers that we have. And here we're going to go by color. Sadly, green and red are just kind of out in the cold. Green and red do not have good answers. They don't have a single card that deals with both the Scarab God and Hazoret permanently. We talked about some of their partial answers. Green doesn't really have answers at all. You're just kind of out in the cold if you're playing green against these cards, so you got to have a splash color most likely. Red, you're looking to piece together Puncturing Blows and Hour of Devastations, but you don't have just a good clean answer to both of them. Blue, on the other hand, has really good answers. Essence Scatter, Disallow, Censor, any of the counter spells. The problem is you gotta leave that mana up, because if you go shields down for just a single turn and your opponent can slip a Scarab God, slip a Hazoret through your defenses, you're probably just going to lose to it. That's why we see blue paired with black or white very often, because black or white give us the best answers to the Scarab God and Hazoret from the battlefield. So as far as white is concerned, the most common answer right now is Cast Out, which is a very strong answer. Instant speed, 4 mana, cleans up the problems, but there's a bunch of other ones that deserve consideration as well. Thopter Arrest is kind of the new stasis snare, or the best stasis snare we have in the format at the moment. Not instant speed, but still gets rid of either god, can also hit artifacts, only 3 mana. Ixalan's Binding is maybe the most permanent answer white has, because not only do you exile the Scarab God or the Hazoret from the battlefield, you keep your opponent from being able to cast additional copies, so you shut those cards out of the game forever. My favorite sneaky answer to either of those cards in white is Desert's Hold. Desert's Hold might not look like a great answer, but because it not only keeps a creature from attacking or blocking, but also locks down activated abilities, it really is a permanent answer to either of those cards. And against Ramanop Red, it's especially sweet because you're gaining 3 life if you had a desert. So I think that there's a big argument for Desert's Hold being one of the most underplayed answers to these cards in the entire format at the moment. So definitely keep that in mind moving forward. As far as black is concerned, we got 2 different plans. First off, black can just attack the opponent's hand. The 2 options here are Doomfall and Harsh Scrutiny. Either of those cards can take a Scarab God or a Hazoret directly out of the opponent's hand. Harsh Scrutiny is especially in line for more play because it's so cheap. Gives you something to do on 1 mana, which a lot of decks are lacking anyway. Worst case, you whiff on it, you get to Scry, which isn't ideal, but you're getting at least some little bit of value out of it, even when things go wrong. So keep these cards in mind as good preemptive answers to either of the gods. And then black has a bunch of exiling effects. So the best one, by far, Vraska's Contempt. The problem is, Vraska's Contempt is expensive. Since it is clearly the best answer to Hazoret, to the Scarab God, once it's on the battlefield, if you're playing a black deck, and it also gets Planeswalkers, it costs quite a bit of money. But we have a couple of interesting budget substitutions. Hour of Glory is a good answer for the gods, same mana cost as Vraska's Contempt. You don't gain the life, you don't get to deal with Planeswalkers, but if you don't want to put out the money necessary for Vraska's Contempt, Hour of Glory definitely bears consideration for budget decks. And then final reward is like the ultra budget option, little bit more expensive, a little bit more restricted, only hitting creatures, but it is 5 mana, instant speed, get rid of any of the gods forever. So that's black. The other card, the last card I wanted to mention, is a Planeswalker in the green-white colors. That is Ajani Unyielding, and I think that maybe it might finally be time for Ajani to shine. Ajani's negative ability can get rid of not just one, but two Scarab Gods or Hazorets before it runs out of loyalty, and as a kind of mid-range top-end threat, there's a lot of potential there. It generates card advantage, helps you dig through your deck, so maybe we can see some sort of Abzan mid-range deck or something that can kind of play big, powerful things, play good removal, and then use Ajani on the top end of the curve as another way to deal with these really hard to deal with threats that put you at risk of losing even after you've gotten far ahead over the course of the early game. So keep Ajani Unyielding in mind as well in your deck building process. Anyway, those are the answers we got, as far as I can tell. If I missed any of the God answers, the answers to Hazoret and the Scarab God, make sure to let me know in the comments which of these do you think are best, which of these are you going to be putting in your decks as answers to these problematic gods. Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.